you can direct the questions to either of them. And please complete that evaluation if you would. And be sure you had that little yellow card in the box. I guess maybe we've got those now.
This question's for Mr. Maddux again. I'd be interested in your philosophy as to including the, I guess what I'd call the backgrounding operation into the cow herd operation. I realize a form of diversity, but what's your philosophy in doing that and following through on those steers as compared to the strict cow-calf operation?
You guys still hear me? I told this story at dinner last night. I have a little bit of blinders on when it comes to how we sell our cattle, because my granddad, his big thing was feeding cattle out, taking them all the way to mature or till slaughter weights. And in 1917, he started feeding cattle, which, you know, not a lot of cattle were fed corn back then. He was a real pioneer cattle feeder. So he would take his own steers, his own home-raised calves, and we'd turn them into yearlings and then put them on feed and feed them out, load them on the train, and ship them to St. Joe and have them killed. So that was a very successful operation for him. And in the 1930s, when the Depression came, he had money from feeding cattle that he could go out and buy ranches and expand our operation. So that really informed him about the value of adding value to the cattle rather than selling just a calf off the cow. So that's where he came from. And when my granddad was dying, he was in the hospital, and he gathered all the family around him. He said, you know, first of all, before I leave you guys, a couple things I want to tell you. Number one, never ever sell any hay. Keep that hay around. It's going to not rain. It's going to be a blizzard. You're going to have a need for that hay. Don't be selling any hay. Number two, never ever sell a ball and calf. Don't sell that ball and calf. Keep that hay around. Add value to that calf and keep him and grow him and get him bigger and feed him out or get more pounds on him. You know, that's important. And number three, he said, I don't know if I'm going to make it to heaven. But if I do, I know the good Lord is going to be feeding steers. Don't be buying those heifers. So you got to realize I come from my grandfather's admonition, but I think it's a good one, is any way that you can add value to that calf. For us, it's by adding pounds and adding pounds to that calf. You know, we try to sell yearlings coming off grass, and we try to get them to weigh 999 pounds. Because you get them over 1,000, you start to get some discount. But at least in the Nebraska market where we are selling yearlings, if you can have something that is a 9 weight, having all those extra pounds to sell really adds value to our business. So maximizing pounds we have to sell is a key driving focus to our profitability.
John, please go ahead and tell us about when you wean your calves and talk about that as a part of increasing value.
We calve a little later. We calve in May in order to avoid putting any feed into our cows. So we used to do that, and we'd wean a calf in say, November or October, and then we'd get them straightened up, and then we'd run them out on corn stalks, and then we'd supplement them a little wet distiller's grains when they're running out on corn stalks. And through the University of Nebraska and one of my mentors there, they said, why in the heck do you wean that calf why don't you just run the pair together and feed that supplement that you're feeding that calf on his own, feed it to the pair. So that's what we do, is we take pairs to corn stalks and we feed them. We don't feed them every day, but we feed them 3 every other day, the equivalent of 3 pounds of dry matter in the form of wet distiller's grain. And then we don't wean that calf until it's almost 11 months of age. And wean the calf, and then the cow has about a month to get shaped up before she has her next calf. And it is absolutely the cheapest way to winter a calf, is keeping her on the cow, making sure you got enough resources going into that lactating cow. But it's a way that we manage our cattle going to grass, is keeping that pair together. We feel it's the cheapest way we can winter a calf before it goes to grass the next year.
Thank you, John. We have a question from Dr. Chris Young. Just want to make a comment about Dr. Young back here. We appreciate Dr. Young being here today. Auburn University sent Dr. Young up here, and in Kentucky, we need to show our appreciation for Auburn University for training our veterinarians, that kind of thing. And so, Chris, we appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. That's very generous of you. And thank you, gentlemen, for the thought-provoking morning conversation. I wonder if we could talk about sunk cost. And the sunk cost, I thought I heard our first speaker say, did you say that open cow was going to take 11 years to become profitable again? And then to our last speaker, if you could talk about probably 2 emotional moments is heifer selection and culling a cow. So that's what I want to talk about.
Yeah, that was that's what I said. That's my best recollection. There's a really great paper by Chris Boyer from our Ag Econ department that dives into what that break-even cost is for a missed calf. And it is, that cow that misses 1 calf, again, she's got to make it to 11, not missing again until she breaks even again, right? But it's likely that she never will, right? And if you have a cow that misses 2 calves, forget about her ever being profitable, no matter what. And my family's operation is guilty of keeping a show heifer that maybe should have gotten her head cut off a couple years earlier. But I think that sunk cost is a perfect way for us to think about it, right? Because developing heifers the right way is not cheap, right? If we want to do that, that's a major investment, not only in resources but in time, right? That heifer isn't going to be ready to make beef, right, which is her ultimate goal, for a couple of years, right, and another year after that, right? So we're 3 years out on that heifer before there's an end product that she's created, right? We're putting a big investment in there. We understand that, but when something like a fertility issue comes up, or she's got bad feed, or she's got a bad udder, it's time for her to go, right? And that emotion, especially when we've got 20 cows, right, or 30 cows, I think is way bigger than when we're operating on the Maddux's level, right? But we have to understand that that's not going to get better, right? If there's a foot issue, it's not going to be better next year, right? If there's an udder issue, that quarter is not going to look better with the next calf. If she's open this year, the likelihood that she's going to come up open next year is higher, right? So understanding when we need to cut those loose, again, while they maybe still have some value, which John just mentioned as well. So I'll turn it over to him to finish that question off.
I guess I would say, first of all, it's pretty easy for me to think about that culling decision, because for us, if I keep her an extra year, she's probably worth $300 or $400 less than what she is when we sell her. So boy, that takes a lot of the emotion out of it. I feel pretty good about it. But as far as heifer selection, we have a different philosophy than most, in that we're keeping almost every heifer. We won't keep a heifer that she came out of a cow with a bad udder or some other kind of flaw of some sort. But we keep almost every heifer, because what we really feel is a huge driver to profitability in that cow herd is keeping those heifers that conceive early in the breeding season. If we can keep we only keep the heifers that conceive in the first cycle of the breeding season. And that, you may not be changing the underlying genetics of fertility, but you've increased the fertility of your herd because of the statistical likelihood that heifer that conceives early in the breeding season as a heifer is going to be more likely to be pregnant throughout her entire life. So if we can only keep the heifers and cows that conceive for us in the first cycle as a heifer, in the first 2 cycles as a cow, we are able to really improve the fertility of our herd, not on a genetic basis, but on a statistic and probability basis. So that is, I feel, a huge driver to profitability, having high fertility in that cow herd through heterosis and through the statistics of only keeping those early calving heifers. We let the AI technician plus the bull determine what the best heifers are. It's nothing in our eye is going to be more powerful than that early conception.
Jared, you mentioned a little bit, but I was curious if you would expand on the relationship between the hair score and body condition. Because a lot of times, you know, I haven't seen very many fat cows that don't slick off pretty well. And a lot of times when you see that really hairy one, she's thin too. So could you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, hindsight's 2020. You know, if we redesigned that hair shedding project today, we would have required a body condition score on every cow that we got a record on. You know, that relationship between body condition score and hair shedding, which way that causation goes, I don't know that I have the information for, but they're definitely interrelated. And if I had to guess, I would guess that those cows that are simply on a better plane of nutrition, less stressed, so they're in that better body condition score, they're going to shed off earlier and easier. Now, there's still probably cows out there that even in a body condition score of 6 aren't going to shed off like we wish they would. So, yeah, I see it as 2 tools that could be used together to make management decisions. Yeah, good question. Sorry, I didn't include that. So our recommendation is to hair shedding score your herd when the average cow has a hair shedding score of 3. You've got a small number of 1s and a small number of 5s. So basically you're hair shedding scoring those cows when your data looks like a bell curve. For many operations, that's going to be sometime within the month of May. So if your cattle tend to shed off a little earlier, maybe you're doing that the end of April. If your cattle are shedding off a little later, maybe you're doing that the end of June, but kind of sometime in that May time frame. A lot of the research, they collected monthly hair shedding scores, but I think in terms of what we're actually trying to accomplish, doing it once a year in the spring works.
One more hair shedding question. When we select for that, are we actually selecting for a trait that causes hair shedding, or are we selecting for something subliminally that results in a cow shedding her hair?
So we've dug into which genes are actually affecting the hair shedding. And when we look at the annotations, when we look at the information that's added to those genes that are being tagged by our associated DNA variants, things that come up are sensing daylight. So that lines up with all of the environmental physiology that we know about hair shedding. Again, back to the metabolism and the nutrition, genes that have functions related to metabolism come up. So I think those would be the two main kind of factors, is that animal's ability to sense the light. If they're sensing the light, they're getting that cue, they're initiating the hair shedding. That's probably the biggest one. And then in terms of how well is she doing at converting that forage into nutritional resources.
Well, that 70% is retained heterosis over multiple generations. If you had, two different, completely different breeds, you'd have 100% of the available heterosis after the first mating. This, with having 5 different breeds at the percentages we used, we can retain 70% of the available heterosis over a long, long time period, because we really don't have inbreeding issues because of sampling lots and lots of sires and the 5 contributing breeds. But also, we don't have any inbreeding reasons for exactly why you mentioned. We use generally only yearling bulls on our cows. Keep a couple hundred bulls around, and then we use those yearling bulls, and when we're done with them, we take the bottom end of them and we castrate them and feed them. And it's a kind of exactly what you were saying, or what I was saying about depreciation, is we can take that bull, castrate him and turn him into a steer and get maximum value as a fed steer at about 19, 20 months of age. And so we try to do that. They don't grade extremely well, being a late cut bull, but they'll be 50, 60% choice. And so we do that to minimize our depreciation. Plus, if you got to have 150 or 200 bulls around, it's like having another 600 cows. And they're always tearing something up. And so if we can manage, and the yearling bulls are easier to manage. In addition, what we've done is after we're done with them in the fall, we'll go through them and cut the bottom end and feed them out. But we also will take the better bulls and we'll feed them, trick test them, semen test them, and then we have a set of customers that buys those coming 2-year-old bulls. We have a half a dozen customers in really tough country in Wyoming, in northern Arizona, in New Mexico, that are looking for those lower input type of cows in their herd. So they buy those coming 2-year-old bulls for their programs. So we're able to get more value out of those bulls, selling them off as 2-year-olds, and then keeping that yearling bull around. And you never really have much potential of any inbreeding issues when you're turning your bull crop that quickly. And who had the idea? On years that it works well, we make a lot of money on those cut bulls. It was my idea. When we lose a lot of money on them, it was somebody else's.
Mr. Maddux, if I gathered what you described, your situation, you sell most of your cows around 5 years of age before they begin to depreciate. I assume the premium that you get from selling those cows and the difference between the depreciation and the increased productivity makes that really profitable, because normally we think about cows becoming profitable and efficient 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then kind of dipping off. that was very interesting to me that the depreciation of those cows, was more of an economic factor for you than the increased productivity and efficiency. Could you just address that thought?
Well, it's two different things. You're measuring the productivity on a per cow basis, on a biological basis. And my reason for selling all those cows before they depreciate is a financial decision, because it is costing you, not that you're writing a check for it, but a fair assessment on your balance sheet. It is costing you as that cow herd ages every year. So we have found that, maybe this is true in Kentucky too, there's a lot of people who feel like, I don't have the resources or the volume or economies of scale to develop heifers. And it's far more profitable for me to go out and buy that running age cow that has been selected for the traits we're looking for, than it is for me to go out and develop a heifer of my own to go into that herd. In addition, and so we worked really hard at making sure every cow we sell has a good udder, is not a high-headed, and any of the cull cows, we don't even sell them at the same sale barn. We sell them at a different sale barn as weigh-ups. And so we built a reputation that the cows we have there are good, solid cows, because most of the time when people are taking cows to a sale barn, it's because they're a problem cow of some sort. But we've tried to have this sale every year. And in addition, with the labor issues that people are running into, and with the demographics of the cow producer, of the cow-calf man getting old, or woman getting older, they like those running age cows that don't take a lot of extra effort that a young heifer or a younger cow might take. So, yeah, I feel like if we do lose some productivity for our cow herd, it's more than made up by the premium we're getting for those running age cows.
One more question.
Well, one more question from the group. Me too.
Troy, you started to talk about the cost of collecting data as we get farther down, like a grow safe system, which is going to be tens of thousands of dollars, and for basically any seed stock producer, even not practical. Then you talked about the metabolic function on cattle. Do you see that type of research getting a genomic application kind of similar to how Herkshet did, where we're able to identify in seed stock populations those traits of economic importance that we can't collect on farm and not have that on-farm expense to the producers?
Yeah, I think that's the goal, and our group is trying to figure out some creative ways to do that. I didn't really talk about it, but on a more high-level scientific level, we're interested in seeing if there are ways that we can, we call them molecular phenotypes, right? Whether that's, we figured out ways that we can measure gene expression and actual metabolite abundances really cheaply. So figuring out how those patterns in things that we can measure cheaply are related to something like a true metabolic phenotype, something that's consistent as you look across an animal's, across time, right? Something you can measure in a female from a simple tissue sample, right, or a blood sample that's going to highly correlate with something like metabolic function. And we've got there's a really, really long ways to go there. But again, buying a $120,000 green feed system, even for the biggest seed stock producer, doesn't make sense. But it's our hope that we can figure out some creative ways to either buy those systems and go out and do some intentional phenotyping efforts. Some of that's going to fall on breed associations as well, if they care about these things, to do a concerted phenotyping effort. Again, very similar to academic and industry collaborations with seed stock producers. And Jared can speak some more to that too.
Yeah, I would say, maybe you don't need to own the equipment, but you need to figure out a way to get your cattle on that equipment. So maybe it's sending bulls to a bull test or whatever it is, but I think those very innovative, customer service oriented seed stock producers will find a way to collect these harder to collect phenotypes, because at the end of the day, whether it's a molecular phenotype or an observed phenotype or whatever it is, we've got to collect the data. The genotype just doesn't get us all the way there.
Let's have one big round of applause to thank our committee again. Thank you very much for all three of you. Wonderful jobs. And I want to thank you as an audience. I've never seen a more attentive audience than we have today, so thank you for being so attentive, being so interested in learning more about the beef cattle industry.